Japan is spending millions of dollars to support the Ainu and their culture, but fears of discrimination remain. In 2019, deep inside a locked laboratory at the University of Tokyo, a scientist broke a century-old taboo. He unsealed a wooden box marked "Do not analyze government property." Inside lay a single skull unearthed decades earlier from an Ainu burial ground in northern Hokkaido, Japan's frozen frontier. Japan has long called itself a land of one people, a nation united by a single ancestry stretching unbroken from the sun, goddess Amaterasu to the modern emperor. This belief shaped everything: the country's divine mythologies, its wartime nationalism, and even its image abroad as a culture of perfect homogeneity. Beneath Tokyo's neon lights and Hokkaido's snow lies another Japan, older, colder, and more diverse than its own history dared to admit. You're watching Stone and Bone, where we uncover the buried truths written in our DNA. So, before we go deeper into the AU's forgotten world, subscribe now to join us on this journey through the bones, bloodlines, and secrets that shaped humanity itself. When the Meiji Restoration began in 1868, Japan raced to modernize. Railways rose, uniforms turned Western, and a new national identity was forged almost overnight. But there was one problem. In this unified Japan, there was no place for the Ainu, the indigenous people of the North, whose faces, language, and beliefs didn't fit the story of one pure nation. The government passed the 1899 Hokkaido Former Aborigine Protection Act, a name that sounded generous, but in truth it was a tool of erasure. It stripped the AU of their land, banned their tattoos and bear ceremonies, and forced children into schools where their native language meant punishment. Entire villages were displaced from ancestral rivers. Women were forbidden to wear their ceremonial lip tattoos, marks of strength and womanhood. Within a generation, nearly half the Ainu population had vanished through disease, starvation, and forced assimilation. By the 1930s, official textbooks described the Ainu as extinct. But they weren't. They survived quietly in fishing towns and mountain valleys, where elders whispered stories of a time before emperors, before rice, before erasure. A time when their ancestors were not Japan's outsiders, but its first people. And to uncover how the Ainu became the forgotten foundation of Japan, we have to travel back to the beginning, long before rice paddies and palaces, to a world of forests, obsidian, and fire. Roughly 14,000 years ago, as Ice Age glaciers retreated, a wave of humans crossed from Siberia into the empty islands of Japan. They became the Jon, hunter-gatherers who settled long before agriculture even existed. Unlike their nomadic cousins across Eurasia, the Jon built permanent villages, carved clay figurines, and fired pottery that predates Mesopotamia by thousands of years. Archaeologists have uncovered vast settlements like Sanai Maruyama in northern Honu, complete with pit dwellings, communal storehouses, and ritual spaces filled with masks and lacquered vessels. On Hokkaido, sites like Funadamari and Hamaoka too hold tens of thousands of bone tools, fishhooks, and ornaments, proof of a thriving civilization that lasted nearly 10,000 years. But their legacy wasn't just in artifacts, it was in their blood. Genetic studies reveal that the Jomon carried haplogroup D1B1A2A P37.1, one of Asia's oldest paternal lineages, along with maternal HLA groups M7A and N9B1, rare outside Japan but common among modern INU. According to genomic reconstructions by Tohoku University in 2024, this lineage diverged from the rest of East Asia nearly 40,000 years ago, the same branch seen in Tibetans and the Andaman Islanders. That means the Ainu are not late arrivals from the north, as old propaganda once claimed, but the direct descendants of the world's earliest coastal settlers. Their DNA is a time capsule of humanity's first expansion eastward, unbroken, unassimilated, and still alive in the forests of Hokkaido. But civilizations rarely stay untouched, and for the Jomon, change would arrive not with swords, but with rice. Around 300 BCE, small wooden ships began appearing along Japan's southern shores. They carried no armies, only farmers. These were the Yayoi, migrants from the Korean peninsula who brought with them two forces far more transformative than war: rice and population. Wet rice agriculture could feed nearly 10 times more people per square mile than hunting and gathering. Within a few centuries, this single innovation reshaped Japan's genetic and social landscape. Jomon villages that once thrived on foraging and fishing were slowly absorbed, displaced, or intermarried into Yayoi settlements that multiplied with every harvest. Modern DNA evidence tells the story in numbers. The Yayoi carried haplogroup O, common across China and Korea. The Jomon lineage, haplogroup D1b, once spread across the islands, now survives mainly in Hokkaido, still found in over 70% of AU men. According to studies published in Science Advances, 2024, as the Yayoi expanded, Japan became a land of contrasts. In Kyushu and Western Honshu, closest to Korea, Yayoi ancestry dominates, reaching over 60%. In northern Honshu, Jomon ancestry still holds at around 40%, and by the time you reach Hokkaido, the numbers reverse entirely. The Jomon legacy stands almost pure. The Yayoi didn't conquer by sword. They conquered through fertility, through farming, through the quiet power of abundance. But their rise also created something new, a social divide between those who farmed and those who didn't. Those who tilled the fields were called civilized. Those who hunted, fished, and followed older gods were labeled barbarians. That single idea, that one kind of blood was more advanced than another, would shape Japan for the next 2,000 years, and it would soon be written into its mythology. By 250 CE, Japan entered the Kofun period, an age of kings, keyhole-shaped tombs, and the first attempt to unify the islands under a single rule. From the plains of Nara rose the Yamato clan, whose power would evolve into the Japanese imperial line. The Kofun were the first rulers to combine the fertile productivity of the Yayoi with the deep-rooted resilience of the surviving Jomon. DNA from elite burials in Nara and Osaka shows this genetic fusion clearly. Roughly 75% Yayoi and 25% Jomon, forming the biological core of modern mainland Japanese. But unification came at a cost. Those who resisted assimilation, Jomon-descended tribes in the north, were renamed Emishi, or Barbarians, and later Ainu. Driven from the central plains, they retreated to the mountains of Tohoku and the frozen forests of Hokkaido, where they preserved the last undiluted echoes of Japan's first genome. It was in this era that myth became law. The Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, Japan's oldest chronicles, declared that emperors descended directly from the sun, goddess Amaterasu. Bloodline became divinity, and by extension, those who didn't share that blood were outside the sacred order of the nation. By the 7th century, the Yamato kingdom ruled most of Japan, and the old Jomon ancestry had been diluted to a trace, just 10% in Tokyo and 9% in Kyoto, according to modern genomic modeling. Yet across the Tsugaru Strait, beyond the reach of imperial armies, one community remained untouched. In Hokkaido, the Ainu lived as their ancestors had, fishing salmon, carving prayer sticks, and preserving a genetic lineage older than any emperor's crown. They had become an island apart, a living time capsule of humanity's Ice Age survivors. For centuries, the Ainu lived on the periphery of Japan, fishers, hunters, traders with the north, but their DNA never forgot. When researchers at Tohoku University sequenced Ainu genomes in 2024, they uncovered something extraordinary. Nearly 97% of the Ainu genome matched late Jomon remains from the Funadamari and Hamanaka-2 sites in Hokkaido, proof that their bloodline had survived almost unchanged for tens of millennia. Their Y chromosome haplogroup D1b remains among the oldest in East Asia, and their maternal haplogroups M7a and N9b1 trace directly back to Ice Age settlers. It was not a remnant of migration, it was continuity on a scale rarely seen in human history. Even their physiology carried ancient signatures. The Ainu lack the EDR V372A mutation found in most East Asians. That's the gene responsible for straight hair and shovel-shaped teeth. Instead, they retain older variants linked to thicker body hair and lighter skin, adaptations crucial for surviving in the subarctic cold. They also possess rare versions of the FADS genes optimized for metabolizing omega-3 fats from salmon and seal meat, a genetic reflection of their coastal hunter-gatherer life. Every Ainu cell tells the same story. culture and DNA, evolving together. A biological echo of a world before agriculture, before empire, before erasure. If DNA could speak, what would it say about your past? Tell me in the comments, because in the Ainu's case, their genome has spoken for 40,000 years without ever being heard. And to truly hear them, we must listen not just to their blood, but to their language. The Ainu didn't just inherit an ancient genome, they carried an ancient voice. Their language is a true linguistic isolate unrelated to Japanese, Korean, or any known language family. It has no script, yet it holds entire worlds within sound. Every word bears nature's rhythm. 20 words for snow, 10 for bear, and verbs for the way a river bends or how a salmon swims upstream. The structure is agglutinative, built by stacking morphemes to form ideas so complex that a single word can mean the sound of sunlight touching water. Linguists using glottochronology estimate its separation from other tongues around 13,000 years ago, aligning perfectly with the late Jomon period. To the Ainu, language was not a tool, it was a relationship. They believed every mountain, animal, and stone possessed a soul, or kamui, and their chants, the yuka, were acts of communion with those spirits. It was a worldview untouched by conquest, one that saw humans as participants in nature, not masters of it. By the 20th century, this voice had almost vanished. After decades of assimilation, only a handful of fluent speakers remained, most elderly, their words fading into forest air. But today, revival has begun. Young Ainu are recording ancestral songs at the Upapoi National Museum, teaching classes at the Nipatani Language School, and even using AI to digitally preserve endangered phonemes once thought lost. The language that evolved beside glaciers now survives on smartphones, proving that silence can be reversed if someone chooses to listen. When Japan entered the modern age, the Ainu weren't just marginalized, they were scientifically erased. In the late 19th century, anthropologists looted Ainu graves, collecting skulls and bones under the guise of research. By 2018, investigators found over 1,600 Ainu skeletons stored in Japanese universities, 1,500 of them at Hokkaido University alone. To the Ainu descendants, these weren't study samples, they were stolen grandparents. The same era saw cultural suppression disguised as progress. Ainu children were banned from speaking their mother tongue, renamed and forced into Japanese schools. Government files classified them as former Aborigines, as if their existence had expired. By the 1950s, Japan officially declared the Ainu assimilated, but DNA refused to comply. In 2012, genetic studies revealed that over 36,000 people in Hokkaido carry detectable Ainu ancestry, far more than the 25,000 who openly identify as Ainu. Entire families had lived unaware of their heritage for generations, their ancestry hidden but not gone. In 2019, Japan finally passed the IU Recognition Act, formally acknowledging them as an indigenous people. Yet many Ainu saw it as symbolic, lacking land rights, restitution, or real representation. Even the Upapoi National Ainu Museum, opened in 2020, was criticized as a state-run monument to a culture the state itself had nearly erased. Still, something remarkable had changed. For the first time, Ainu representatives worked with scientists, not against them. Through projects like the Ainu Repatriation Charter, 2022, ancestral remains began returning home, accompanied by prayers instead of lab reports. The very science once used to dehumanize them now became the key to restoring their identity. It's a rare story in human history, where DNA, once weaponized to erase, became the voice that proved survival. Today, the Ainu story isn't just preserved in museums, it's written quietly in the blood of millions. Consumer DNA tests have revealed faint traces of Jomon and Ainu ancestry across modern Japan, sometimes as little as 2%, sometimes over 10%. Artists from Sapporo to Tokyo are rediscovering their heritage, weaving new textile patterns into streetwear and remixing traditional Tonkori heart music with modern beats. A movement once silenced now hums in classrooms, galleries, and song. According to new genetic models, the Ainu genome still flows invisibly through modern Japan, far beyond Hokkaido. It's a reminder that the islands were never the domain of one people, one race, or one myth. They were always a tapestry, layers of migrations, convergences, and forgotten kinships. Every rediscovered song, every repatriated skeleton, every young Ainu who learns a word their grandparents were forbidden to speak. Each is an act of resurrection. The genome that Japan tried to bury has become living evidence that you can suppress a people, but not their ancestry. Which would you rather know, the version of history you were taught, or the one your DNA remembers? Share your thoughts below, because what comes next is proof that history never truly dies. The Ainu are not the ghosts of an extinct tribe, they are the living proof that memory can outlast empire. Their DNA endured ice ages, conquests, and centuries of forced assimilation. It crossed time silently, carrying the songs, ceremonies, and survival strategies of the first people who called Japan home. Even now, haplogroup D1b still runs through veins that once held obsidian tools and bear ceremony prayers. Their language, once whispered in exile, now echoes in classrooms. Their faces, once hidden, are reappearing in art, film, and pride. Because identity doesn't vanish when it's denied. It waits. And when the silence finally breaks, it returns not as myth, but as evidence. The DNA that Japan tried to bury became the very proof that rewrote its history. And beneath its modern cities and rice fields still lies a genome that refuses to die, a memory older than any empire, older than the word Japan itself. If this journey through blood, bone, and survival moved you, subscribe to Stone and Bone, where we uncover the forgotten chapters of humanity's DNA and reveal how the past still lives within us.